You're listening to Small and Supercharged Conversations, a fun, chatty podcast with me, Ria Freeman, and some of the amazing people I get to work with in my Small and Supercharged Mastermind group. If you listen, please do screenshot, please share to stories, and please tag me and the amazing guests in this episode. I hope you love it. This is the start of part 2 of the Small and Supercharged Conversations podcast, and on this episode, I am interviewing Ruth Chappell from Dressage Anywhere, Jane Pike from Confident Rider, and Nicola Kinnard-Comedie from NKC Equestrian Training. If you want to know more about these amazing ladies, do pop back to part 1 and you can get a bit more about their businesses in that. But I hope you love this episode, and as always, please do screenshot, please share to stories, and please tag us all if you tune in. It's lovely to hear who's listening, and I think you're going to love this one. So this is a question from Tracy Langley.
Just regarding the online qualification training, it's just how you know if that's a qualification where, you know, it's 100% and you can get insurance and everything, and that you know that when you book online on the training that you can trust in what you're purchasing. Because I think as an individual that's looked at online training, it's just that bit daunting on just knowing that what you're about to invest in is 100% genuine.
Nicola, can I have your take on Tracy's question?
All my courses run together with qualified vets, and I think that gives a huge degree of reassurance because my courses are evidence-based and they're giving the latest veterinary recommendations. And so when we say, you know, this is a myth that you should be letting wounds dry out, that you should be covering everything in blue spray or even worse, wound powder, you can trust that because you can see it's a vet telling you the information. How people can feel confident on the sort of CPD side, I've worked with a variety of organisations. So for example, my conference is approved CPD for BHS coaches, and it's also my live training sessions with Sue Dyson that I've run a couple of. Again, BHS have backed those, and some of the physio organisations, ACPAT, I've been working really closely with. So I think all those things do help. I also like to, if people are interested, I send them some sample lessons and say, you know, try this, see what you think. So if people want to know about my nutrition course, I send them a couple of lessons. I send them some of the content, not a little bit, I send them like a whole bit on, I don't know, feeding the laminitic horse. And then you know what you're buying. So I think for anyone thinking about taking part in online learning, I think it's possible to try a bit before you buy. And testimonials, you know, I've had less people coming on online courses, but it's the same content that I've delivered in person. We've had nearly 1,000 people come on, take part in some training, and I've got so many fantastic testimonials, and I think that helps as well. And I guess, you know, find out a bit more about the providers, you know, what's their social media content like, and maybe just pick up the phone or ask to have a call with them and get your questions answered. Like the others are saying, I'm really big on connection, and I feel like I know the people that take part in my courses, just whether it's just through some chats or maybe a chat on the phone or something, or some messages. So yeah, I think do your homework, and you know, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask to see what you're purchasing into. And then for me, if I'm buying an online course, that just takes the stress out. I want to know what I'm getting. I'm very into the how, and I think that really helps.
I think that's really good. And I think as well, when you mentioned about, you know, follow people on social media, we have such amazing access nowadays to actually find out about the people that we're going to be getting that training from before we get it. We can feel whether they know their stuff, whether we agree with what they're saying, whether we've learned something from their free content a lot of the time, before we even take that step. And I know, again, with the courses I do with Thinkific, you get a free preview. And I know that's because it's a specific course. But as you say, there will be content somewhere, whether it's a blog or a preview, or even like you kindly send the lessons, there'll be something there that people can get a feel for what's going on and how that's going to work. What about you, Jane? What's your tips on this?
Yeah, I think you have to use your own discernment about where you invest your money, of course. But then if we can flip it around, like I probably know more about the teachers that I'm learning from online than I do from someone that I'm rocking up to a clinic for or going to someone in a physical space for, because that accessibility and sort of like super sleuthing that you can do online is so easy. The other thing is that usually when I come into a learning situation, I have been absorbed in that person's world for a while with their free content, with something that's been going on. So it's not like a cold call. And if it is a cold jump in the deep end, it'll be through a recommendation of someone else that I trust that allows me to feel good enough about that purchase to go through with it. Yeah, and as well, like we can kind of like harness our intellectual and intuitive powers in that, you know, if it's a 2-day course to qualify you to be a medical doctor, probably not going to be the one that you're after. But, you know, if there's like backup and it seems like to you that the learning duration and model fits the outcome, then, you know, you start to look into it a little bit more. So I completely understand the concern, but I think that the way that our learning evolution is going and the way that online training is going, it is a primary mode of learning, and you just have to do the same work that you would to involve yourself in any kind of learning experience. I put a lot of free stuff out there and testimonials and that sort of thing as well, and I don't give away anything that's within the paid structure of the program, but it's I think as well, just in terms of like being yourself and being authentic on the outside, what you see of me on the outside is what you get when you sign up. Like, it's not a shock. You're not like, wow, she's rigid on the outside, but she's really loose when you get in there. It's like, nope, she's pretty inappropriate in both spaces. So yeah, it's it's just a joke, but yeah, you know what I mean. Like, I think just being authentic so that the movement from a free medium to a paid medium is not one where you're like, that's a shock. And I think that can be the disappointment that I felt when I've signed up from things in the past where you're like, wow, this person was so onto it and cool, and I really felt like I knew him on the inside, and then it's like a hollow cave when you get in there. They're either not there or the content seems really removed from who they are. So just on the other side of the fence, I think that's an important thing to consider as a creator. Yeah, it's just go with your gut, and also then, you know, think about what do you look for, what's important to you, does this seem to match up, does it have the qualifications that are important for you to come out with. You know, my work is not like, I'm not registering anyone as a training body or a coach or anything like that, but if you were, I guess it's like, well, who's it important for you to be affiliated with at the end, and you sort of start at the place you want to be and work your way backwards to find people or places that match up with that outcome.
Definitely. And what's your advice on this, Ruth? I mean, you can think about your judges, I guess, is one big thing.
Yeah, well, and our governing bodies as well. I mean, one of the things that we did before we bought the domain, but before we even built a website, we went and spoke to all the governing bodies in the UK about what we were going to do, and, you know, would they be on board and enable us to do this. We didn't just throw up a website and start running their tests. We actually wanted to collaborate and work with them. So, you know, we can provide that reassurance to our customers, our competitors, and people who train with us that, you know, we are working with governing bodies to make sure that what we do is run with integrity, and it's consistent and it's fair as well. So yeah, certainly from that angle, you know, we've always worked really closely with all governing bodies, but also our judges. I said earlier that we mainly work with list 1 and 2 judges, but when it comes to the training classes, we try and make sure, well, we don't try, we actually do make sure that it's a list 1 judge who is judging those tests, but they're also a trainer judge. So it is somebody who would actually go out and coach and train people and has their UKCC accreditations and everything. So we make sure that those guys are signed up for the training classes. But it's about making sure that the right level of judge is judging the right level of competition. There are some restrictions placed on, say, list 6, which is a trainee judge, list 5 and list 4. Whereas list 1, you can judge everything up to, I think it's Grand Prix, I might be completely wrong about that. But off the top of my head, you know, it's quite a high level. And you'd see a list 1 at a national competition as well. So we try and make sure that we've got people with the right qualifications and the right expertise and the right knowledge, judging the right areas in competition and training.
That makes perfect sense. So our next question, this is from Victoria Bodie, who you may know as Equiboodle.
I just wondered if anything had changed for any of you for the better or for the worst over the last 4 months now during lockdown and this new normal that we're all experiencing.
Vic does have a second question, but I thought that's quite a good one to answer on its own. So I'll go to, I think Nicola knows an answer. Jane looks very thoughtful. So Nicola, let's go to you first.
Great question, and I do have an answer. I mean, it's been a really difficult time for everybody, really stressful. So the positive that I've been able to take out of the situation is that through providing live online training, both expert training with C. Dyson and other vets, as well as the horse first aid course, I feel I've been able to help people, particularly in the lockdown part of lockdown, early on when people were unable to get their vet out as easily unless it was very much an emergency. Knowing that I was helping people to update their knowledge, that was definitely a good thing. People have become much more au fait with online training. If you had said this time last year, come on a live call on Zoom, people would have just not run a mile screaming, but less people would have been so keen. Zoom has become so normal for so many people now. So that has been a benefit, because making online training so much more normal just means that more people have been able to benefit. So difficult situation, but I feel like I did my best to help fill people's time, help the professionals like the physios, the massage therapists who weren't able to work. At least they could get lots of CPD logged during that time, and help owners to know that they've got better horse first aid skills. Not that a tool that can replace a vet, nor should it, but at least it would have helped with their decision-making process. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
No, that's a really good answer. I think as well, your kind of ability to pivot is so good to see, because I know you obviously did have it online before, but the fact that you've gone, well, actually, how can we make this so it is immersive, it is interactive, people feel like they're really getting that value for something that could be seen as quite a practical, because of how you ran it before. I think that's all credit to you for that. I think it's brilliant. And I think, as well as you say, you can't replace a vet with good first aid training, but on the flip side, if you can treat a wound well to start with, you could actually save yourself a vet bill and a very poorly sore horse. So that's got to be a big win as well for a financial point of view, as well as all the coronavirus related issues as well.
Yeah, definitely. I've had many people come on the course and then afterwards say, I feel this has saved me money because I feel clear when to call the vet, and also knowing when to call the vet faster. It's a false economy sometimes to wait. So yeah, definitely.
How about you, Ruth?
I think well, I mean, we've always been online, so there's not been much change there. I think for us, where we shut down our competitions for a month during April, we had to think very quickly about what we do. Do we take a month off and not do anything and I don't know, watch everything unfolding, or do we do something special and something different? So we came up with the whole hobby horse dressage idea, just to kind of give people something to do during lockdown, because it was all a bit scary and crazy at the time. But to also start to raise some money for charity as well. So all of the profits from that competition, and quite a bit more actually as well, went to the NHS Charities Together Urgent COVID-19 Urgent Appeal. I think we saw in the early days of lockdown, we saw a lot of competitors launching online dressage competition and training websites and platforms, which was a little bit uncertain at the time, but actually in hindsight, it's made the idea of online dressage a little bit more acceptable, if You see what I mean? It's kind of made the market bigger as more people learn that this is a thing. I'm always amazed by people that, you know, old friends or acquaintances that I talk to, and they say, oh, what do you do for a living? You say, well, I run an online dressage competition website. And they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. Is that really a thing? And, you know, people still don't understand that this is something that is available to riders. So yeah, it's made the market bigger. It's made people understand what's out there for them and how to get involved. And yeah, it's been great.
How about you, Jane?
Well, the infrastructure and the way that my business has run was already well established before COVID, and so in that sense, the difficulty actually came through already working at home and having my business run in the same capacity, but now having my children home as well, and all of those kind of like family dynamics that work into having a business and running from home, which I know I'm definitely not the only one that has kind of felt the burn with that a little bit. But for me, if I can approach it from a slightly different angle, and I guess it's COVID related, but not as well. But the whole social movements that have arisen during this time, for me, like the BLM protests, everything that's been happening in America really affected me really deeply. But the way that impacted my business was to get me thinking about inclusiveness and how representation within what it is I'm presenting through my podcast, on my platforms, and also the limitations I recognize that do exist within how I'm presenting material right now. And this will be for para riders, for instance, that might be blind or deaf. How do they access my material? Can they access my material? And so these types of questions that embarrassingly I didn't even entertain before, not through not wanting to, it just wasn't floating into my orbit. Now what's happening is that I did a great thing at the beginning of lockdown, decided to like completely redo my membership program. So I'm halfway through that, and now I'm like in the dark night of the soul where I'm like, there is an end, this will be coming. So the second half is being finished now. But as a person that wants to do all the things all at once, I'm practicing pacing myself. So once I've got that done, then the next stage is to look at, okay, how accessible is this material to non-able-bodied people or people with some kind of learning limitation or difficulty, like things like transcripts, things like subtitles, things like I'm going to have some consultations with people that do assessments of your platform and say, look, this is what someone with a hearing impairment or a vision impairment experiences when they come on your site, and just that are outside, that are in my blind spot, basically. And so that's my aim. I think I've had limitations there in the past because it's expensive. You know, that's one, like, realistic, I hate to say that, but that's the reality. Like, I only have so much that I can do. But so that for me has been a kind of wake up call in lots of ways that I appreciate, and you know, I've recognized also the enormous privilege of being able to operate the way that I am. And so how can I use the skills that I have to help people navigate what has been a really difficult time? Yeah,
I love that. That's a well, they're all very strong answers, but I'll just put you in Ruth's direction as well. Ruth does quite a lot with the RDA, the Riding for Disabled Association. So I'll just volunteer Ruth to help with that.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, I had 2 people contact me that were para riders, and of course, like, and I was like, it just hit me. I was like, well, if you log in, one was blind and the other, and I thought, like, I felt frustrated because I've had, you know, just a very tiny situation. I know I'm going off track, but when my husband hurt himself and I had to wheel him around in a wheelchair, you realize, like, the roads, the access to shops, like, so frustrating. And I didn't want my place, my shop, in whatever way, to be somewhere where you couldn't get in if you had if you physically weren't able to fit through the door, you know, like, just to use that analogy. And so I was like, how can I do that? And I can't do it all at once, but I can certainly make movements to sort of eventually, in like a year's time, hopefully saying, yeah, come on board, like, we're all there for you, we're trying to like work that out. Yeah.
I'm going to play Vic's second question now.
Where do you see your businesses taking you in a year's time, or in 3 years' time, or in 10 years' time?
Let's go Jane, because Jane's doing her thoughtful face again, which to me is getting, I'll think about this, but I'm just going to go for Jane.
Where do I see my business taking me in a year's time? Or, so such an interesting question. You know, my business has evolved so much along with my personal learning and journey. And I remember talking to a horse trainer who was recounting another conversation with another horse trainer they had, who said, you know, oh, are you still doing the same thing you were doing 5 years ago? And they're saying, well, I certainly hope not, you know, because you would want to be in 5 years' time, perhaps looking at things in a different way and presenting things in a different way. And for me, that's what the latest incarnation has been in terms of redoing my membership. Actually, the content no longer is in alignment with what I understand to be true and work now, and I need to update things. And that isn't a patchwork quilt job. I need to like reroot this tree, you know, from the bottom and take it to the top. So for me, I don't know where it will be going in terms of, I think I would just like to expand on what it is that I'm doing now. And that expansion is so much more than just more members in the program. It's more about like the ability to help people in a more efficient way. And I think that's where I would like my business to go, in that my own evolution and learning means that when someone presents me with a challenge, I can go, I know a more direct route to how that can be unraveled. And for me, that would be really satisfying. It's certainly like if the last 10 years have gone from anything to go by, it's like my business is, I'm the sole earner in my family now. And that's a pretty huge deal for me. And I've gone from someone that's literally plowed all my money back into supporting my family, and my husband's a stay-at-home dad. So it's, I don't know, I think just sort of expanding horizons. I know that's such a general waffy way of saying it. I almost don't want to give myself a really tight framework, because it's like you just don't know what lies ahead, and that's the exciting part of it, I think. Yeah.
I mean, who would have expected a global pandemic if this isn't the thing? I mean, it's
right.
I think so many people have had to pivot so severely during this time. It is I think it can make us feel quite not afraid to look ahead, but make us maybe consider more possibilities, or to
definitely
think, oh crikey, actually there's a lot of scope here, which isn't what I necessarily thought, but there are different areas that have become really important.
If you want to bring all your stuff to the surface, have your own business, because like if you want to confront your visibility or financial or like concerns about imposter syndrome or your own capacity, having your own business is the way to bring all that stuff to the surface and have to look at it.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's great. Those two are sort of entwined together, I think.
What do you think, Ruth? What's your thoughts?
I don't really know, actually. I think when we set Dressage Anywhere up, it was, you know, we're going to run BD competitions for a couple of years and see what happens. And then it very quickly evolved to include RDA and Pony Club and British Eventing. And the kinds of competitions that we run now are quite different. We've got quite a few leagues and online championships as well. So I think, I don't want to say too much actually, because there's some ideas in my head that I wouldn't like to give away.
Yeah.
But there are some angles around training that I would like to explore. And from a technical perspective, what you can do with data and the scores and comments that people are given, and how you can use that to build a more robust training program to help them. So if you're working with somebody who is truly the other side of the world or the middle of nowhere, or, you know, we've got a number of competitors up in Scotland, for instance, who don't have access to trainers very often or competitions, then, you know, we could try and help fill that gap for them in some way. So yeah, it's a bit woolly, but deliberately so. But I think kind of building on the training angle is where we'll be.
Definitely. How about you, Nicola?
Well, it's a great question, and probably like the other two, it's quite tricky to answer in some respects, but some things I can categorically say I will be doing. I will still be working with experts. I will still be helping lots of horses and horse owners. The next few months actually see a new program launching, which is designed to help physios and massage therapists. So I've really enjoyed working with these equine paraprofessionals, and it's going to be a combination of CPD, so vet training, as well as some business training. So I've got some different experts coming in to talk about, finances, getting more clients. As Jane said earlier, there's a lot you need to know about how to run your own business. So this would be the sort of ideal thing for people who haven't had such a great bounce back from lockdown, maybe someone that's newly qualified. So I think working with more professionals is something that I really enjoy doing. The next 3 to 10 years, I'm really excited about where it will take me, actually. I think just as Jane and Ruth have said, your business does evolve, and I love Jane's comment about how I don't want to be doing exactly the same thing. There'll still be myth busting, there'll still be the best recommendations from the vet world, and I just really want to reach more people. I just want to have a bigger impact and know that I'm helping more horses. So yeah, I hope that answers the question, but a good cryptic question, Vic.
I love that answer. I love that answer. I know I've done some work with Harper Adams and guest lectured there with their vet physios, actually, and it's really exciting to see people who are about to kind of go out into the working world. It's a really lovely thing to see, actually. So these questions, we've got a few. Emily really went for it there, from Emily Cole. So I might do a couple and then pause, and then a couple and then pause.
How has your business changed since you started it? Has it gone in a different direction to what you thought? What's been the biggest learning curve?
Okay, I think they're probably quite ones that we can kind of stick together quite well, about the biggest learning curve, because I imagine that is often connected to how your business has changed. So Nicola, should we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Biggest learning curve. Well, so many things. I think Jane summed it up really well. When you start a business, you're everything. You're the marketing department, you are chief content creator, finance, you're everything. So yeah, that is a learning curve, massively. Learning to do all the things. And I think also learning who to ask, because trying to figure it all out on your own, you can waste hours, weeks probably of time. So that's definitely been a learning curve, as to where to find help. And definitely, if you are either start your own business or thinking about it, don't be afraid to ask for help, and definitely get some help, because it's a long, lonely road trying to figure it all out yourself. My business has massively changed in the last almost 3 years since I ran my first course, which I simply set up as a Facebook event on my phone, thinking that sounds really fun. Put together a presentation from some, sort of reuse some content I already had, worked together with a great vet, and it was so much fun. It was really popular. So run another one, and then the next year, suddenly I had run 35 courses in the following year, and it's just gone from there. So yeah, I think that's the biggest learning curve, is trying to work out all the things, and then realizing, I think Jane put it really well earlier about your zone of genius, that don't worry about the things you're not so good at, just outsource them, and just focus on what, not so much you find easy, but what you derive a lot of pleasure from, because I think it's so noticeable in your content. If you love, recording a podcast, or you love writing an article, then perhaps don't force yourself to do some of the other streams that you don't enjoy so much.
No, that's really, really good advice. Ruth, should we come to you?
Yeah, I think I echo what Nicola just said, and Jane has touched on previously about having to wear many hats, sometimes in the same hour. But I think, our business has evolved and changed a lot over the years, from just running simple BD competitions, to running more complex championships and things. But I think my biggest learning curve was a piece of advice that somebody gave to me a couple of years ago, actually, which is when it comes to competitors, in particular copycat competitors, stay in your own lane. I think when you run your own business, you kind of, that business kind of becomes you, and you are that business. And so if somebody says something negative about it, or you get some poor feedback or something, something you might have accidentally done wrong or made a mistake with, or somebody didn't agree with something, then you do take it personally. and it's really hard not to. And you do need to kind of learn to distance yourself from those kinds of things, and take stuff on the chin, or, you know, sometimes it's as simple as the way that you talk to yourself, you know, when you receive an email from somebody who might be a bit upset about something. You know, you might read it in a particular tone that's a bit aggressive or negative or something, and you need to stop doing that and speak to yourself in a more positive tone, and it kind of stops yourself from getting overly upset over something. But yeah, that's different from stay in your own lane, so that's two things. But I think it's stay in your own lane, you know, focus on what you're doing. Don't get distracted by somebody else who's popped up and is doing what you're doing. They're just making the market bigger for you at the end of the day. And it doesn't really matter what they're doing. You need to focus on where you're going and what you're doing, and keep that as a priority. So I think for me, that's my biggest learning curve.
I love that. How about you, Jane?
Yeah, so in terms of the changing, I guess I see it like Russian dolls, you know, like the little doll, and then there's the medium-sized doll and the big doll. It's kind of like an integration, like you take where you were and you bring it with you, and then things kind of evolve from there, rather than it being like that got left behind and now I'm this. It's sort of like I see it moving in that way. The second question, learning curve, was it? But what was the biggest learning curve? Oh my goodness, like I can't even think. The whole thing is like a huge learning curve. But very much what Ruth said about, I think that as a consequence of having my own business, and for many of us, it's not natural to be posting on social media every day about, you know, especially like I share quite a lot of stuff. Like that's not I really enjoy connecting with people, but ideally, you know, I'm not like one to sort of stick myself out and like look at me all the time. But that, you know, finding your own voice, I think, has been one of the gifts of having my own business. Like I feel very solid in what I believe, in what I stand for, and I'm happy to back that up now in the face of opposition. And that's been a very practiced place to operate from. And it doesn't mean that I don't get like a physical response to someone saying something critical or disagreeing with me in some way, but it doesn't topple me. You know, it's like, okay, now I can retreat, and now I can come back and I can respond to that in a way that maintains my integrity and dignity. And I think that's I'm sort of attached to my own backbone and my center, I guess, and that's come through the practice of having to continually put myself out there for my business. The other side from just a technological standpoint is understanding people's different learning styles. So I'm a very motivated learner. Like if someone gives me a lot of material, I go in there and I get into it. And what I've learned is people very easily overwhelmed. So like I used to think giving people all of the things was the answer, but it's not. They actually don't want all the things. They want you to tell them where to go and what step to take. And that was kind of a eye-opening thing for me. And then I think moving on from that, I do a lot of video, a lot of podcasts. And if I think about how I was at the beginning in my videos, like really wooden, and there was like one space. So we've got a little cottage where my mum-in-law lives on the same property as ours. And there was one space below the heat pump and above the desk that was the only blank space of wall. So I used to perch myself in there with this like horrendous peach background, like, and do the videos. And now I've got like much more of a pro setup, and I feel the same talking to you as I do in normal times, whereas it used to be if I turned the camera on, I'd be like, who is that person, you know, and you forget what you're saying. And so that kind of naturalness as well, that only really comes through being horrendous for a period of time and just keeping on going.
I think it is an evolution. I think you're absolutely bang on. And I think that's something that we should sort of embrace as you know, anyone listening to this. I think it's good to change. You know, we've said before, you don't want to be exactly where you are in a year or 2 years from now. And I know that, you know, with my business, I went from kind of PR, like writing not a million press releases, but writing a lot of press releases and working with brands on their marketing. Then I was in-house as a marketing manager for a couple of years for a big brand. Then I went freelance again. Now I basically run my groups, and I've now started doing a small amount of mentoring again, which is something that I knocked on the head because I was doing something else, but actually my passion is much more in teaching. So obviously I've got the groups and things like that, but I kind of resisted it quite strongly, going, well, I did it before, and I did this instead. But when you move through and you get to a different place and you've got different learning, I think it's really good to adapt and change and to appreciate that that's important.
Definitely. Yeah. I think the other thing to mention that potentially for all of us here, like, and I'll speak for myself, is my learning and evolution is happening in relationship. It's happening in relationship with the people I'm working with what's necessary for my family, what's working for me and what's not working for me. And so that being part of that ecosystem informs where you take things. And that's where I kind of get reluctant to think, where I want to be in 10 years time, for instance, because I have an idea of that and what I'd like it to look like, but I know that everything up until this point has been actually informed as part of this dynamic dance. And so I can't tell what that other side of the equation is going to present in terms of how I decide to move things forward. And so that's the alchemy of it, I guess.
It's a really good way of looking at it, actually, because I think sometimes we can struggle to think, oh, well, wait, people say, oh, well, in 10 years I want to be doing this, this and this, and I always think, well, I'd like to be doing this, this and this, but that might come next year, or that might be longer, or actually when I get halfway down that route I might think this really isn't for me, I'd rather do something else, and then you feel like you've messed that up potentially, but actually you realize
exactly.
It wasn't for you when you were halfway down, because it could be that it's just not for you, or you've got some family-based thing, or there's just so much, isn't there?
Yeah.
I'm going to try and play a couple more of these.
If you could talk to yourself before you started your business, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give to someone who wants to make the most out of your learning courses? Like, how should they approach the course?
Okay, so a piece of advice you would give your former self. Nicola.
Okay, what I would tell my former self would be, you're enough. What you know at the moment is enough. You will learn more, and you will never perhaps feel totally ready. You could waste hours getting the perfect logo, color, website, whatever. Just go for it. And I'm glad I did. So I think I would tell my former self, just go for it, and your future self thanks you.
Too. I think it's you fathom so much out on the way, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. And you can change stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, as Jane said, I think as long as you're passionate about what you're doing, that will shine through. And if you make a mistake or haven't quite got the right font color combo, you can improve that.
You're right. Couldn't agree more, actually. Ruth.
That just reminded me of a book that I recently finished called Start Now, Get Perfect Later, by a chap called Rob Moore. And he's in property related stuff, but he's written loads of books that are relevant for all kinds of business owners. But it's a really interesting book, and it's a really interesting concept that Nicola just reminded me of, that is that don't wait until you can get something really shiny and perfect, because I'm one of the world's greatest procrastinators. Just do it. Just get something done. Just get your first crap draft done of something, and get it out there. And I think I do that a lot more now. And obviously I've got better at stuff the more I've done it. But I think if I had to give my younger self a bit of advice, it would be just do it. Just get started now, and you'll get perfect later.
Go for it, Jane.
The piece of advice I would give myself. So there are two things that spring to mind, and I guess, can it be reflective? So I'm going to approach this from a slightly different way. Whatever I want. Yeah. So when I started out with this, it wasn't that I didn't have supportive people around me, but I come from a family that will support you when it's successful. So it's like when they see the evidence of this thing working, and I think that's sort of relating to maybe different generations of like going to work and doing the thing because the financial reward or being able to care for someone is the thing. It doesn't matter if you don't enjoy it. That's the thing. So that stability and safety was the kind of place I was evolving from. People get concerned or express doubt, not because they don't love you or because they're not interested in you, but because to them, their values of safety and stability are the most prevalent features of their life. And if they believe that you're risking yourself in some way, they can try to kind of dissuade you from that, because this entrepreneurial way of going about creating a life is a relatively new feature that's available to more of us than it was previously, if that makes sense. And so I think that being someone that is really inherently passionate and has always followed her nose, perhaps at the detriment of financial security, that can ruffle people around you, and you do have to hold your own faith that what you're doing is right, and it will wobble at times. And so I guess what I'm most proud of myself in is that, you know, I held fast to what I wanted to do, even in the wobbles, and even when other people were saying, we don't really think it's working, like, how much have you made this month? Like, that's not where the parameters they're measuring success against is different from what you're in it for in the first instance. And so that's the first thing that I would say. And the second thing is to not seek your validation from people that are unable to give it to you, in that, like, this mindset of coming into a business and starting your own business, it's not for the faint-hearted, and it's not for everyone. That's the other thing. And that some people would rather go to work 9 to 5 and come home with a stable check at the end of the week. That's not me. But if I search for affirmation of what I'm doing from people who totally aren't on the same page as me, which I think a lot of people do, then you can really easily get derailed, because you're actually swimming in a pool that's not sharing the same thought stream or way of going about things as you. So for me, that meant involving myself in online communities with people that were doing the same thing, like the mastermind, like, you know, from way back, different business courses. So I could find people in the same thought stream as me that didn't exist in my immediate physical surroundings. And I would say even now, like, as somewhere where I live, like, I can maybe think of one person in my physical zone that is doing something similar, you know, one person, and that's only come into my experience recently. Everyone else kind of gets it now because online learning is becoming more of a thing, but it wasn't something they'd be like, you what? Like, even the insurance company here that we have to deal with, they've classified me as a cloakroom attendant because they do not have a category for me that I fit into. So that was the one that they could just, like, put me in. They're like, they were like, we don't have a thing for you. And so it was like, they just couldn't understand work with horse riders but not be with horses, which was like this incredible levy. I'm like, but I'm online. They're like, oh, so that we'll just give you this thing, which shows you kind of like the systems that have been in place that have just dealt with like bricks and mortar or very functional ways of developing business haven't quite caught up with the modern paradigm of how we're doing things, you know. But I think that some of us, in terms of our own psyches, are stuck in that as well. Like, we're coming from a place where it was very usual to operate and work in this way. Now this is how we know it can be, but there's like a lag time with things catching up. And so we get stuck in that lag time of other people's consciousness, of other people's thoughts about how things should be done, which is often related to their insecurities. And so the advice I would tell myself is, you're actually, like, just because the people around you don't get it doesn't mean that you're wrong in what you're doing. It just means you're in a different place. Yeah, that long-winded talk, that's where I was getting to.
No, I love that. I'm actually thinking if that's where we kind of leave it, because I think that's actually a really good, because I think that the question about how to navigate the websites, I was thinking about it. We've kind of talked about that in terms of like the different things you provide, but I think that kind of way of wrapping it up is actually could be really good. So thank you so much to Jane, who is at confident_rider on Instagram and Confident Rider on Facebook. And Confident Rider, are you .online, Jane?
Yes, my website's confidentrider.online, and my Facebook handle is at the Confident Rider, I think.
You're just doing it to make me look like a fool, aren't you?
Just mixing things up.
Thank you so much to Jane, to Ruth, who is Dressage_Anywhere on Instagram, and your dressageanywhere.com. Yes. And your Dressage Anywhere on Facebook too.
Yeah, we are.
And Nicola, you are NKC_Equestrian on Instagram, and your NKC Equestrian Training on Facebook.
Yeah.
And your website's nkcequestrian.com.
It is indeed. Very well remembered.
I mean, I feel I've peaked now. Thank you so much to everyone for listening. As always, if you do listen, which we'd love you to, please do screenshot, please share to your stories, and please tag us all, because, you know, I've given you the Instagram handles and that was really hard for me. So thank you so much for listening. I really do appreciate it.